Welcome to CWS Christian Writing and Speaking. I'm your host, Jackie Wilson, and today's guest has an interesting story. She went from being an atheist to learning her way through the faith by critically assessing and evaluating her beliefs about God and looking at where her beliefs actually came from. This person is not only an author and an entrepreneur, but she's also a wife and mom. She enjoys homeschooling and she enjoys traveling. Let's welcome to the CWS stage, Miss Wendy Cunningham. Welcome, Miss Wendy Cunningham.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, I'm excited. I have to hear about your journey because it's interesting that you said you took time to evaluate where your beliefs came from and then decided to move from being an atheist to a believer in God.
Yes, and the way you phrase it makes it sound like it was a quick and simple and easy look. But it was a lengthy journey with, a lot of twists and turns, obviously. And, to be brought up as an atheist is not, that's almost overstating it because
Mm,
atheism is a lack of a thing, whereas, Christianity is a foundation. So in so many ways, I didn't even really think about being an atheist. People ask me all the time, what was it like to grow up as an atheist? I'm like, I didn't know I was supposed to be growing up a different way. We didn't talk about God hardly ever. There was so much eye rolling, if any, mention of church or Jesus or the Bible or anything. And I say I was kind of generationally atheist because my grandmother, who was like my second parent, my father was a little bit absent in my story. So my grandmother, my mom's mom, kind of stepped in, and she was very much a matriarch figure, very much did not believe in God. And so my mom kind of took that, and why would my mom challenge that? And then I didn't challenge it either. And so it wasn't until I was in my early 20s, because I went, public school in California, on to a secular college in California. So, very anchored in things of the world, if you will. And in school, they teach you about evolution and the Big Bang. And so I just wasn't even exposed to the story of creation. I was aware that there was an alternative school of thought about our origins, but I thought that was ridiculous and unscientific and cult and all of the things. And I actually found myself, gosh, probably in high school, before I realized that Jesus was a historical man who walked earth. I thought he was like the Easter bunny. Like, you could just absolutely not believe that he ever even existed, but he existed, whether he was the son of God or not. That was even news to me. So all of this goes along until I meet my now husband, and we start dating in my early 20s, and he was a Christian, which was not necessarily obvious to me right out of the get-go because I didn't know any Christians. So it was weird, right, to even have one come into my life at all. But he wasn't going to church, he wasn't very engaged, so I didn't really recognize that was kind of a part of his story until, we were already in the dating game. And then he really recognized very quickly, and this is kind of the where the catalyst for my book came from, was he realized I don't believe in God. So of course I don't believe in Jesus. So the gospel message is not going to work. I don't believe in the Bible. So there's nothing he can quote from the Bible that's going to have any resonance. So he kind of had to go about it a different way in terms of engaging me in this conversation. And he started with asking me questions instead of telling me what was
mhm.
true about God. He asked me, why don't I believe in God? Where does that come from? And what do I believe in instead? And quite frankly, as I started to articulate my beliefs, which I held very firmly as a 21, 22-year-old, lady, I was really embarrassed very quickly at the revelation of how shallow these beliefs were and how shallow my answers were. And I would say things like, well, because faith is ridiculous, or because my mom and everybody I know believes that there's no God. So, I knew very quickly, even as I was saying the words, these have nothing to do. These answers are not indicators of truth. These are
Mm.
just reasons I have found myself in my 20s as a not believer. They're not really pointing me towards any evidence of any kind in either direction. So even I could realize that, which then it kind of sends you on a deeper journey of, well, gosh, could I be wrong about this? And that's the title of my book, is What If You're Wrong? And that's kind of the premise that my husband put forth was, what if you're wrong about it? And, I was very defensive, and I was very aggressive towards, I didn't want, there's this misconception certainly in non-believers that Christians are trying to get them, like this comes from like the evangelists that knock on your door and like talk to you for 100 years on your front porch. And, I just had this, like, he's trying to get me, like, I don't want to be gotten. I don't want to believe what you believe. And that wasn't his heart at all. And that wasn't his approach. He was very, gentle, and allowed me the space to investigate all this. There's a lot there, and it's really devastating. It's not just good news when you're discovering this in your 20s, because my grandmother had already passed away as an atheist at this point. So I'm trying to reconcile what that means, if this is true, what my husband's saying. And, there's a lot of just really mourning what you thought you knew for sure, mourning the pride and ego that's breaking off of you, and surrendering, which is never easy to do. So it was a lot of conversations, actually several years of these conversations, where I really had to evaluate all my beliefs and how they were or were not true, and then start to investigate what is true, And at the end of the day, my husband knew, whether intentionally or subconsciously, that his only job, and this is true today, was to set me on the journey of seeking, because the Bible promises that if we seek, we will find, right? If we're seeking God with our heart, he is going to reveal himself to us. And my husband trusted those promises and knew, I don't have to tell her everything that is true. I just have to send her seeking truth. And if she is doing that, she will find truth. And that's exactly what happened. So that's kind of a long-winded answer to my journey, the question of my journey.
But it's a very honest answer, and I appreciate that, because I think a lot of people are resistant when Christians are talking to them, because they thinking you just one of those Bible thumpers, and you're trying to make me do a certain thing. And really, his gentle approach, it was rather an invitation, you know,
Yes.
get to know him for yourself. Go on this journey for yourself. See what it is that you find out if you walk down this road. And I love that. So tell us about your book. Mention the title again.
It's called What If You're Wrong? And I wrote it, the kind of the thought behind it was, I've always been a blogger and written kind of shorter, nonfiction stuff. And ultimately, I felt like God was putting it upon me that this wasn't a blog, this was a book, this was meant to be a tool, because it was unusual the way that I came to faith. And, not to say that other people don't find faith this way, but most, Christians lead with this one size fits all. I just need to tell them the message of God, the gospel message. And again, that wasn't going to work for me, because I didn't even have the foundation of understanding a creator. So, Jesus just was not going to be my entry point. There was a lot, we had to go all the way back to the beginning. And also this idea that a lot of Christians try to evangelize by only telling instead of asking. And Jesus in the Bible asked a lot of questions, not because he did not know the answer. Obviously he did, but so that we would do that self-reflection and come to find our own answers to these really important questions. And so that was kind of my husband's model. And so the book, titled With a Question, is filled with a lot of questions that are stumbling blocks for people on their way to faith, but also for Christians. I have found, now that I am a Christian, especially moving from the West to Tennessee and into the Bible Belt and getting really immersed in kind of the culture of church, I realized that a lot of people, in the same way I adopted my parents' atheism, a lot of people adopt their parents' Christianity and don't ever go back to evaluate the answers to these questions. And now that I'm a mom, I recognize there is a big disconnect when you are trying to teach your child something that you don't fully understand. And so, my kids ask me hard questions about evolution, about the Big Bang, and I have answers to give them. And I wonder if a lot of Christians have, I mean, they may not believe it, but do they know why they believe it, or why they don't believe it? Do they know where the answers are in the Bible that they can point their kids to? So the goal behind the book was both a tool for someone on the search, like I was, who might want to evaluate some specific questions and really reflect on their own beliefs, as well as a tool for a Christian who wants to get deeper in their own faith, but also maybe they have some family members or friends who are stumbling in their faith or not believing at all. And the book would give them the opportunity to see how you can approach it from a different angle. How can you engage them instead of tell them? How can you ask
Mm-hmm.
instead of,
Mm-hmm.
just spout, give them a drink of water with the fire hose? Because we do that. We get real excited and we want to save people. And, that's the right heart posture, but is it the right method? And so, that was kind of the goal behind the book and what the intended audience would be with that book.
Mm-hmm. And so tell me how your book has impacted people you've come in contact with.
Gosh, my own journey, obviously coming from a a multi-generational atheist family. Obviously, no one in my family believed when I came to faith. And so my journey and organizing my journey into a book that I could give to my mom or give to my cousin or my sister has been an amazing tool to help them understand, because they knew me then and they know me now, and they don't necessarily know all the things that happen in my head. Like they know all of a sudden now you believe and you never believed. Like, what's the deal? Your husband got you. It's like this. No, there's so much there. There's so much that I had to think through and evaluate. So it's been a great tool in my own family just to help them understand the journey I went on. And praise God, there are now my sister, my cousin, Christians and believers in my family. But also, actually, just this past weekend, I was sitting with a friend who is also a writer, and we were talking about certain projects we've worked on. And she helped me edit my book, and she gave my book to her sister-in-law, who's not a believer. And it opened, her sister-in-law read it, thought it's very, I use humor. That's like my vulnerability tool to get connected with people. So she's like, it was hilarious. I couldn't put it down. I loved it. I want to talk to you about it. So it was an open door for her to now sit down with her believing sister-in-law and talk about, like, okay, she had some good points. Why don't I believe? Now I see where that came from, but now I have a bunch of questions. Because when you come to realize, okay, what I believe maybe isn't true, then you're just flooded with a million questions as to what is true and where do I know and how do I find out and how do you feel so confident about this and how do you even read the Bible and blah, blah, blah. And so now it has opened the door to those more in-depth conversations, because there's this like bridge that, that happened, kind of like let me give you like a foundation so that we can come into a more meaningful conversation from this book. So those are, and as I was writing it, I also had a person I did not know, but she was a self-proclaimed atheist, and she agreed to read my book and email me. Like, I would send her a chapter. Mind you, I don't know her. I don't even know what she looks like. It was, I would email her a chapter, and then she would email me questions, and we would talk about it. And then I'd send her the next chapter. And so at the end of the book, she said, okay, I can confidently say I don't believe what I used to believe. She said, I'm not quite ready to say I believe what you believe, but I don't believe what I used to believe, and I'm on the journey. And I was like, that's it. That's the goal. That's the whole plan. Right. So those are just some kind of personal testimonies of what I know it's done in just some close relations.
Yeah. So I have a couple of questions. What do you say to the person who is toying with the idea, um, walking down that road to discover whether or not God is for real? And what
Mm.
do you say to the family who is struggling to introduce Jesus to their loved one?
Sure. Well, for both, I would say I hope you would read my book and find that that adds value to your search or to your journey for sure. But I also would say for both of those scenarios, don't underestimate the power of prayer because, for the believer, you have to recognize that God is pursuing your unbelieving family member more than you are. He wants them more than you want them to be in eternity with you. And so when we intervene in prayer, that is almost our best. We think of it as like well, I'll do that, but is that really enough? That's everything. That is everything. We're literally taking a petition to the Father of the universe. Like, of course, that matters. So that I think is super important. And my husband used to say that to me while I was on the journey. God wants to reveal himself to you. He doesn't want to be hidden. He wants you to know him. So if you pray to him, he will reveal himself to you. And that was so strange to me. Like as a non-believer, I'm like, what do you even say? Like, how do you pray? And I even wrote in my book that it felt like I was like calling my old grandpa that I barely knew, but like I was like, I'm supposed to call you and like, hello, I don't know what to say, but like I think you love me and like we're connected. It was like this weird uh so it was foreign to me, but I did what he said, and I started to, okay, Lord, if you are real, I want to know. I'm seeking, like, reveal, show me, lead me, let me meet someone that's going to give me the next piece or whatever, not really knowing what I was saying, but that's exactly, he started to answer those prayers. He started to reveal those things and brought me the girl that I met randomly that invited me to the church, that I got into the Bible study. Like he started to open those doors to the next piece when I was ready. Because had he been like, okay, I need you to go to church and join a Bible study and get this version of the Bible and do all, I'd have been like, ah. So he was faithful to just take me one step at a time. And that's why it took a while, because it wasn't like one conversation convinced me like, oh, you're right, I'm wrong. It was a series of conversations. It was a series of revelation. And he really was faithful to, like, literally when I went to this church for the first time, I'm feeling just wildly uncomfortable in church, have no idea, what do you wear, like every question, I don't even know, like, what do I sit in the back, like, do I put my hands up, like, how do you do this, I don't want to like stick out. And the teacher was talking about a book, if you're curious about Jesus and how much he has impacted your life, even if you haven't ever believed in him. And I'm like, you're kidding, that's me. And he recommended a book. This is like the first time I'm sitting in church, and so I bought that book and then I read the book. It was like God was revealing these pieces one little chunk at a time as I continued to pray for these things and ask for these things. He did those things and then ultimately fully revealed himself in a way to me that was, like, if you're a believer and you know what I'm talking about, that moment where you can't go back anymore because you have like a God encounter, and okay, that was real, that was God. You have chills, you're just like, okay, I can't say that God is no longer
Mm.
real. That was, so that he even was faithful enough to bring that kind of clarity to me. So that is my advice for both, is to pray, just continue to pray, don't cease in that.
Amen. Powerful testimony, hands down. Just absolutely powerful. Please tell people how they can connect with you.
Yeah, I am actually the best place to meet me or anything I'm about is at my website, which is gainingmyperspective.com. I have a podcast. I have a new devotional that I just put out via ebook. My book is there. I'm kind of off social media at the moment, so that's kind of the best. And you can email me directly there also if you had questions or wanted to ask me about my story. That's definitely the best place to find me.
All right. People, connect with her. Wonderful story, just an absolutely powerful testimony. And if you have loved ones who are struggling, get her book. Introduce them, give them the invitation. Don't try to force them. Don't try to use your old methodology that obviously has not worked. Give them the invitation so that they can move forward into their faith. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. We look forward to you joining us for the next one. Until next time, beautiful people, God bless.